conversation. So it is a really, really big game that you're playing. When we laid out these 7 concepts, the way we wanted to approach this was first from the asset side of the balance sheet. So we took the 7 core financial planning concepts that we had learned as advisors and we had utilized. Safety, liquidity, and return, the 3-legged stool that most advisors are taught to use to differentiate products. Hidden cost, okay, what we call EPR, taxes, leverage, and diversification. So what we really do is we look at the house from an investment vehicle standpoint. In other words, how does the house compare to other investments from a safety standpoint, from a liquidity standpoint, from a return, hidden cost, taxes, et cetera, okay? Now, we spent a day and a half just on this stuff, okay, we're going through the training, but I want you to think about the house itself and how does it compare to other investments. And I'm going to share with you some of the concepts we use when we're talking to advisors to get their motors revving a bit about this whole new game that's being played. One thing I want you to think about is accumulation. Advisors have lived most of their lives focusing on accumulation of assets for their clients. And now they're being asked to make a major shift into distribution. Because if you're 65 and you aren't saving anymore and you've retired, the clients don't care about saving money anymore. They want to know, how much can I spend? So there's a huge shift. If you're a financial advisor, you're having to master asset concepts while simultaneously mastering distribution concepts. It's a whole big shift in the industry. And this snapshot here, which was done recently in a study by this Dynamism group, looked at what the average American in the U.S. today would look like when the boomers hit peak retirement. They'll have about $232,000 in Social Security-related value, $155,000 in private pension value, $175,000 in other savings, and $141,000 in house equity. All right? So the reason this is important is there is going to be a huge opportunity for loan officers who can help their clients understand real estate from a distribution strategy standpoint. You're not in the reverse mortgage business, you're in the distribution of equity business, okay? And there are lots of strategies for distributing equity. Reverse mortgages, selling the house, borrowing, HELOCs, selling the equity, shared appreciation. You could have a series of strategies for becoming an expert in your community and talking about how to get wealth out of the house, 1031 exchanges, etc. So these are all individual things that a single one of these ideas, if you decided I'm going to be a distribution expert, can make a big difference in how you're perceived in the market. So here's a dynamic going on in financial planning. I retire on Friday and haven't saved a dime. Here's your chance to become a legend. All right? So a lot of clients are walking in the door right now, and what do they have? What is the one asset that they have? They have this big old house, and maybe a house they're inheriting, and maybe a vacation property, and that's retirement. Well, there's only 2 ways to get at that, right? You sell it, or you borrow against it. And that's where you come in. If they sell it, they're still going to need a place to live, so you'll probably get in that game. But at a minimum, you want to learn, how do I help clients consider the distribution strategies that are available? Another dynamic that I want you to think about here is what we call the house versus home dynamic. Because when I say the word to you, home, what comes to mind? Friends, family, okay? Neighbors, relaxation, things like that. What we say and what we explain to advisors is home is essentially an experience you have in the house. In other words, it's an emotional thing for your clients. That's very important for you to understand. When we started working with clients doing loans around wealth, we found it was extremely important to separate house and home. If it's okay with you, we're going to focus on your house, your physical shelter, because it has all of the key components where we can help you, looking at appreciation, tax benefits, mortgage lending, a place to work, and things like that. Because a lot of people get in their own way. They get tripped up over the language, and they start thinking, I don't want to talk about my home, because home to them is security. Okay, but what do we say the greatest fear of Americans is? Not having enough money in retirement. So it works both ways, right? The security issue can be a big one for people, but it's wonderful if you're a financial advisor because it gets right to the heart of the matter for a lot of these folks. So think about house and home and how they're different. House is a shelter, home is an experience, and all I'm asking is for your permission to focus on your house and how we're going to use it to build as much wealth for you as possible over your lifetime. So, no, those are just the closing costs. The house is an additional $175. when you're thinking about how you're valued in what you do, probably one of the key trends here that I want you to think about is your role in this thing called advice, okay? The advice that you provide is where you're really going to get paid in the long run. And I've heard a lot of different folks say that at different events and seminars, but I can tell you the entire financial services industry is moving to an advice-based industry. That's what clients want. They want somebody to tell them with some conviction what's going to happen. They want them to eliminate the unmeasurable risk in their lives. So here's another one, rate versus return. What is the difference between rate and return? Perspective. Okay? When I say rate, I'm typically talking about a borrower who's concerned about their rate, which is what to the lender? The return. If you are investing money, you're focused on your return, which is just the rate to someone else. So rate versus return is just simple perspective. They're the same thing. When clients are beating you up over rate, they're beating up their advisors over return, but it's the same thing. It's a balance, okay? So understanding that can be very helpful when you're positioning your conversations with your client. Another shift that you might want to make is understanding the difference between lending and investing. And I'm going to, again, posit here that they're the same thing. Because a typical client borrows when they need money that they don't have, right? A typical client invests when they have money that they don't need. But what is investing? It's a loan that you make to someone else for a return. You're lending it to a bank or an insurance company or a public company or a stock or whatever. So my key point here is your role in this process is going to be helping the client navigate when they should borrow and when they should lend. Everybody with me on that? Because lending is just investing. When do I use OPM, other people's money? Okay, and when do I use my own money? What should I do? And you'll find if you really get right down to the heart of the questions that your clients ask, almost 95% of them, I guarantee you, okay, are about the highest and best use of my money. 15-year fixed, 30-year fixed, biweekly. Should I pay cash for the house? Should I not? They're all the same question. Where should I put my money? What's the highest and best use of my money over time? If you can help yourself or your advisors that you work with shift to realize that all they're doing is helping clients lend money, then you're in the same business. You with me? The financial advisor is just helping them decide where to lend their money for the best return based on goals that they have. And you're there to help with lending as well. So again, this languaging, this convergence, it's key that you start to connect with the advisors and the people that you work with, including your clients. If your client just simply understands that you're going to borrow and lend your whole life, my job is to make sure that the problems don't compound over time such that it costs you $1 million or $2 million over your lifetime. Liabilities versus assets. What's the difference between a liability and an asset? Or when is a debt a debt? We used to ask clients, what do you consider a debt? Is it borrowing? Or if you have a $500,000 loan and $10,000 or $1 million in the bank, are you in debt? Because I can show you that on a 30-year mortgage at 7% fixed, $200,000 mortgage, I'll have a $1,330 payment. If I assume I have $200,000 and I'm trying to make a decision, I can make a decision to, let's say, borrow $200,000 and have a $1,330 payment, or pay cash and have no payment. But if I look at this from the perspective of a liability or an asset, then if I have a $200,000 mortgage, I have what? $200,000, which let's just say I invested at 7% over 30 years. It's $1.9 million. I could have paid cash for the house and done what with the savings? Invested the $1,330 a month over the same time period at the same interest. And what happens? It grows, but it grows to $1.6 million. So my question is, that's a single mistake right there that could cost the client $343,000. That's a pretty conservative 7% return. Historically, the market's returned much higher than that. But if you just compare 7% borrowing, 7% investing, and just simple decisions. Now, the other question that I would have in some cases is, what would be more difficult for the client? A one-time decision to invest $200,000 or $1,330 a month over 30 years? Yeah, it's much easier to make a one-time decision. So you have to ask the client what's going to work for them. But you have to ask yourself, what's the difference between an asset and a liability? Is the $200,000 mortgage here really the liability? The liability